The black Tesla was a shield, a cocoon of temperature-controlled leather and silence. But when I stepped out, the sharp, relentless Colorado autumn air hit my face like a slap from 5 years ago. 5 years since I had walked away from the Hayes family dynasty, with nothing but my programming skills, a busted-up sedan, and a silent promise echoing in my ears. Watch me. The Rocky Crest Lodge towered ahead, all dark marble and gleaming, pretentious glass, set against the backdrop of the turning aspens. 150 guests were inside, celebrating my grandmother Alara's 78th birthday. They had no idea what was coming, and what they didn't know could fill a library the size of my old apartment. My phone vibrated, a low, urgent pulse against the palm of my hand. Owen Miller, my COO, never texted unless it was critical. He understood the difference between a crisis and this. AG's office confirmed the audit backs up their case. The warrant is active. Could happen tonight. My fingers tightened around the device, the expensive, custom casing digging into my skin. Attorney General. Warrant. Tonight. The words should have terrified the girl I used to be, the one who craved their praise. But instead I felt something cold, heavy, and undeniably sharp settling in my chest. Justice. Or maybe something far more potent, final, unyielding vindication. I adjusted my $3,500 charcoal Armani blazer. It fit like a suit of armor, tailored and impenetrable. The same family who had dismissed me as a failure, a hobbyist playing with code, 5 years ago, had no clue that their disappointment now ran Vanguard Shield, a global cybersecurity empire valued at $250 million. Watch me, I whispered again, this time to the polished marble steps of the lodge. But even as I said it, a tremor of weakness ran through my hand. The memory, a persistent parasite, crashed over me like it always did when I got too close to Willow Creek. That dinner, 5 years ago, it wasn't just the money, the mahogany table that could seat 20, the crystal chandelier that cost more than most people's starter homes. It was the crushing weight of their contempt. I was 26, desperate, still clinging to the belief that if I just tried harder, I could earn my way into their respect. The last time I saw this family, I was Skylar. Tonight, I was S.H. Hayes. The name change was not just for the Forbes list. It was for survival. It was a declaration that the girl who walked out was dead, and the woman who returned was ruthless. I took a deep breath of the mountain air, focusing on the scent of pine and impending confrontation. I was here for Alara, my grandmother, the only person who ever truly saw me. She was my anchor, the secret reason I hadn't changed my number 5 years ago, the only name I'd kept unblocked. And she was the reason I knew, with absolute certainty, that I would survive the emotional minefield waiting beyond those gleaming doors. The entrance swung open as a well-dressed couple, regulars in this high society bubble, emerged. They didn't recognize me, and why would they? The last time the Willow Creek elite saw Skylar Hayes, I was a ghost, the family failure, the inconvenient one. But tonight, the ghost was a fortress. The ghost was the CEO. I felt Owen's text burn again in my memory. You sure about this? I can handle everything from here. I didn't need to be spared. Running would prove they were right about me. And I was done running. I've got this. I typed back. I had built my life on this mantra. Whatever pain was dredged up tonight, whatever dramatic scene unfolded, I knew who I was. My worth wasn't determined by people who couldn't even recognize a thriving tech company if it debugged their entire network. I reached for the massive brass handle, its coldness grounding me. For one brief, heart-stopping moment, I let myself feel everything. The fear, the white-hot anger, the grief for a family I never had, and the sharp, exhilarating hope of a future finally free. 5 years of silence was about to end in one evening. The family that broke me was about to discover exactly who I had become in the breaking. The memory is as sharp and clear as the sound of crystal clinking on that mahogany table. It was 5 years ago, late October. The Hayes family dining room was a monument to old money and crushing expectations. Playing with code isn't a career, Skylar. My father, Harrison Hayes, the real estate mogul, delivered the line with his usual blend of dismissal and disappointment. His voice, once booming and intimidating, now sounds small in my memory, but back then it was gospel. He couldn't fathom that technology might actually matter more than square footage. My mother, Diane, placed her wine glass down with a delicate, audible clink. When are you going to get serious about your future? Why can't you be more like your sister? Candace, the golden child, the centerpiece of all my childhood comparisons. She leaned back in her chair with a smug smile I knew too well. Her perfectly coiffed blonde hair and her designer dress were just part of her armor. Her specialty was the quiet cut, the comparison designed not just to wound, but to paralyze. Actually, I might have something for Skylar, Candace purred, lifting her chin. My nonprofit could use an assistant. Part-time, of course, just to handle the filing. It's steady work. An assistant. Part-time. This came 3 years after I had started building the core security software that companies were already buying. I had just closed my 3rd audit contract. It was a slap in the face, a condescending offer designed to keep me small, to keep me perpetually needing her charity. My mother's face lit up as if Candace had just announced a cure for cancer. See, Skylar? Candace always looks out for family. She's responsible. The weight of 26 years, my entire life being the scapegoat, the one who couldn't measure up, crashed down on me. I'd worked double shifts at 16 to pay for my community college classes, while Candace's full education was funded without question. I'd listened to years of, "Why can't you get straight A's like your sister?" I'd built something from nothing, an elegant, complex system, and they called it playing. But it was what Diane said next, her voice soft and wounded, that finally broke the last part of me. "I just want to be proud of you, honey." Is that too much to ask? I am proud of you. 5 words. 5 simple words I had chased my entire existence. 5 words she had never once said. Not when I graduated summa cum laude, a detail they barely noted, or when my first client paid me $50,000 for an audit. The need for her approval had been my fatal flaw since childhood, the broken coin I kept feeding into their jammed vending machine of love. I was the daughter who stayed up until 3 a.m. perfecting projects for parents who noticed nothing but flaws. I was the young woman who kept believing that if I just achieved enough, if I just made enough money, they would finally, irrevocably see my worth. But sitting there, watching Candace's satisfied smirk and my parents' expressions of relieved dismissal, because their golden child had successfully solved the Skylar problem, I finally, profoundly understood the truth that would change everything. The game was rigged. They needed me to fail so Candace could succeed. They needed me to stay small so they could feel big. They needed me to remain desperate for their approval so they could dole it out as a reward for compliance, a leash disguised as love. I stood up from that table. The expensive leather chair scraped loudly against the polished floor. Dad's face went slack with shock. Candace's smile faltered, a hairline fracture appearing in her perfect composure. "Watch me," I said. 2 words. They meant everything and nothing. Watch me what? Build something real? Prove my worth? Succeed without you? I didn't know yet. I just knew I had to go. I had to rip the parasitic need for their approval out of my heart, regardless of the pain. I walked out the front door, leaving their astonished faces frozen in the crystalline light of the chandelier. I blocked their phone numbers. I returned every Christmas card unopened. I chose myself over their approval. It was the most terrifying, gut-wrenching, and utterly liberating decision I had ever made. Tonight, at the Rocky Crest Lodge, I was finally going to show them exactly what I meant. For 5 years, the mantra, "Watch me," wasn't just a whisper. It was the power source for Vanguard Shield. It was the fuel for the 18-hour coding days, the 3 days I went without sleep securing a major infrastructure client, and the countless frozen pizzas that sustained me in my studio apartment. I didn't build a company. I forged a fortress. It was born from a laptop on a rickety folding table, fueled by a determination so fierce it burned away every lingering trace of self-doubt my family had ingrained in me. My code was clean, efficient, and unbreakable. My business ethic was rigorous and unforgiving. I was building systems that mattered, systems that protected city grids, state records, and public safety infrastructure for 3 different states. The financial success, the $250 million valuation, the 50 employees who relied on my leadership, the penthouse overlooking downtown Denver, was just the byproduct of that focus. The real success was the transformation of Skylar Hayes from the family failure into S.H. Hayes, CEO. The name change was essential. It was a gender-neutral, powerful identifier that ensured when people read about my company's success, they never connected it to Harrison and Diane Hayes' disappointing daughter. They certainly never connected it. My parents and Candace never bothered to look beyond Willow Creek's society pages. They missed the Forbes 35 under 35 feature. They missed the keynotes. They missed the awards. Because to them, I was still playing with code. They had to believe I was still struggling. It made their own mediocre lives feel bigger. But now the time for silence was over. Tonight was Alara's 78th birthday, and I was walking back into the fire. I was sitting in my Tesla, parked discreetly a block from the main entrance of the lodge, waiting. My internal clock was ticking. I ran a hand over the smooth charcoal fabric of my blazer. It felt solid, like the code I wrote. I wasn't the broken girl who walked out 5 years ago. I was winning. Yet that anxious 26-year-old version of me still lived somewhere deep in my gut, whispering, "You don't belong here. They'll prove they were right. You'll crumble under their judgment." I slammed the mental door on her. No, I was here because of a choice. I had built a life on choice, not on compliance. Owen's text was still on the screen. The warrant is active. Could happen tonight. He had offered to handle it all, to let me avoid the emotional battlefield. Owen, my COO, the first person who ever saw my worth before I proved it, was the only brother I had ever truly chosen. But running would validate every hateful thing they'd ever said. I was done running. I looked at the lodge again, the lights shimmering off the marble entrance. Alara was in there, the true North Star in my constellation of chaos. I was walking back into this emotional minefield for her, and for the peace I needed to finally earn. I knew I would survive it because I was the one who had made the choice to return, not them. I checked my reflection in the side mirror. The Skylar I saw was composed, sharp, and entirely self-sufficient. I knew my worth wasn't determined by people who couldn't even recognize a thriving tech company if it debugged their entire network. The doors of the lodge opened again. Time to walk the walk. I grabbed my keys and stepped out, embracing the cold, clean air. The moment was here. 5 years of silence, anger, determination, and grief, all converging into one spectacular, inevitable evening. The family that broke me was about to meet the woman they had forged. 3 days before Alara's party, the first warning arrived. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was buried in my morning inbox, a digital time bomb disguised as a text from my cousin, Jillian. Candace is planning something big for Grandma's party. She says she's going to expose the truth about you. My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. The high-altitude light pouring into my Denver penthouse suddenly felt too bright, too scrutinizing. I was 47 floors above the city that had rebuilt my life, and suddenly I was 26 again, heart racing, palms sweating. That old, familiar knot of dread, the one reserved exclusively for my family, tightened in my stomach. Expose what truth? I hadn't spoken to any of them in 5 years. I had operated under a ghost protocol since I walked out of their dining room. What could Candace possibly know about my life now? The success of Vanguard Shield was meticulously masked behind the gender-neutral SHAs. My public profile was intentionally sparse, my private life a fortress of boundaries. I took a shaky breath, then forwarded the message to Owen without a word. My COO understood family warfare better than most people understood their own careers. He built his fortune escaping an equally toxic clan in Boston. He didn't need explanation, he needed a target. His response came back in minutes, fast enough to calm the tremor in my chest. On it. Calling contacts now. That was why I paid Owen the big money. Well, one of the reasons. The other was that he was the only person I trusted completely, which said everything about my relationship with blood relatives and nothing about his qualifications. Owen was my chosen brother. I tried to focus on the day's agenda, a new proposal for a statewide data security contract. But the text message held my attention hostage. Candace wasn't subtle. She operated on public optics and emotional currency. If she was planning an exposure, it meant humiliation was the goal. She wanted to prove, publicly, that even if I had achieved some small measure of success, I was still the unworthy, ungrateful daughter who had abandoned her loving family. She wanted to reclaim her position as the moral center, the golden child who stayed home and cared for everyone. I hated that the old fear still had hooks in me. 5 years of therapy, a successful business, and the quiet validation of competence, and still, the threat of their judgment could make my stomach churn. It was the legacy of being the scapegoat. You always expected the knife. I pulled up Candace's charity website, Willow Creek Hearts, just to check the pulse of her own narrative. Pictures of Candace smiling beatifically next to a check presentation. Flowery text about community and sacrifice. I scrolled through the annual report, noticing a few too many high-end donor appreciation events listed under operational costs. It was a suspicion, nothing more, but the pattern of superficiality Candace always projected was consistent. I closed the laptop. The real work was already in motion. Owen's contacts would find out what Candace was planning. She might have hired a PI, but she was going up against Vanguard Shield's internal risk assessment protocols. She was using a butter knife. I had an integrated cyber defense system. The most painful part wasn't the threat of exposure, but the realization that after 5 years they were still fixated on tearing me down rather than building themselves up. I put on my running gear, needed the cold and the pavement to burn away the anxiety. I had a war room in my head, and I knew how to fight the psychological battle Candace was trying to start. She could plan her ambush, but I would control the narrative. I had to. 2 hours later, Owen was standing in my office. He didn't even bother to sit down. He had the expression I'd learned to fear, professional concern wrapped in barely contained fury. It was the same look he wore when he discovered our biggest competitor was trying to steal our proprietary code. This time, the competitor was my own sister. She hired investigators, he stated, cutting straight to the chase. Ridge and Stone out of Denver. High-end firm, Skylar. Not cheap. She's sinking serious money into this. My chest tightened, a cold vice clamping down on my lungs. What kind of investigators? The thorough kind. Specifically, Grant Peterson. Former FBI, 20 years experience. Specializes in financial forensics and background verification. Owen dropped a thick manila folder on my desk, Candace's signature paper filing, which felt jarring in my all-digital office. The good news is he's ethical, won't fabricate evidence or break laws to get dirt. And the bad news? He's very, very good at finding what's actually there. I stared at the folder without opening it. Inside, I knew were the photos, the financial snippets, the employee interviews, the architecture of my carefully constructed new life, laid bare for Candace's entertainment. 5 years of careful separation, meticulous masking of my true identity as S.H. Hayes, all undone by a ruthless private investigation. How much does she know? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Owen's silence stretched too long and heavy. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of bad news delivered gently. She knows about S.H. Hayes. She knows it's you. The world tilted sideways. S.H. Hayes, my professional identity, my gender-neutral shield in the cutthroat tech world. My protection against anyone connecting Vanguard Shield's stratospheric success to the Hayes family failure. 5 years of careful effort gone. She knows you're on the Forbes list. She knows about the $250 million valuation. She knows your COO is Owen Miller. Skylar, she knows everything. I sank into my chair, the plush leather suddenly feeling like quicksand. This was worse than I imagined. Candace didn't just discover I exist. She discovered I succeeded spectacularly while she was playing local nonprofit director in Willow Creek. She discovered I was a titan in my field, achieving more in 5 years than my father had in 30. Her humiliation, and therefore her planned attack, would be monumental. So what's the angle? I muttered, running a hand through my hair. She can't prove the money is dirty. Every cent is accounted for and taxed. She must be planning an emotional attack, saying I used family contacts, or I abandoned them while they were struggling. Owen gave me a grim look that told me I was only half right. That's what she planned. But Grant Peterson is former FBI. When he traced the payment sources for his fees and Candace was paying a fortune, he found something interesting in her finances. My blood turned to ice water. The irony, the horrifying, perfect irony, was starting to take shape. What kind of something? Owen pulled out his phone, scrolling to a document that made his jaw clench. $500,000 embezzled from her nonprofit over the last 3 years, plus another $50,000 stolen directly from the Hayes Family Trust. He looked up from the screen, his eyes intense. Peterson's legally obligated to report felony financial crimes to the Colorado Attorney General's office. The reality hit me like a sledgehammer. Candace hired an investigator to destroy me, and accidentally destroyed herself instead. The golden child, the one who spent years criticizing everyone else's ethics and demanding moral superiority, was a criminal. The sister who was handed everything had been stealing from charitable donations and from our family trust. It was poetic. It was devastating. The silence in my office was deafening, broken only by the soft whir of my computer server. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The irony wasn't just poetic. It was an act of cosmic, brutal justice. When does he file the report? I asked, the words feeling foreign and heavy on my tongue. He filed it this morning, Owen confirmed, his voice now flat and professional. He had no choice. It's an ethical requirement for a former federal agent reporting financial malfeasance of this scale. The Attorney General's office confirmed they are opening an investigation. It could result in federal embezzlement charges. I should have felt triumphant. I should have been roaring with vindication. Candace, the pillar of the community, the perfect daughter, was facing years in federal prison. Justice was being served on a silver platter, delivered directly by the private investigator she had hired to dismantle my life. Instead, I felt sick. Not because of Candace, but because I knew what this meant for the rest of my family. The Hayes family's carefully constructed world of appearances was about to implode. Harrison and Diane Hayes, pillars of Willow Creek society, were going to discover that their golden child was a thief facing 5 years behind bars. Their charitable foundation queen was a criminal. Their social status, which they valued above all else, was about to crater. And they would blame me, not because I reported anything. I didn't know about the embezzlement until 30 seconds ago, but because I was the family scapegoat. I was the permanent problem, the daughter whose very existence seemed to invite catastrophe, the one who made waves simply by being alive and successful outside their control. The AG's office is going to move fast, Owen noted, snapping me out of my psychological analysis. A criminal investigation into a high-profile family nonprofit needs quick action. They'll want to secure evidence and prevent flight risk. Including at Grandma's party, I finished for him. I pictured the scene. Rocky Crest Lodge, 150 guests dressed in their finest, celebrating Alara's 78th birthday. Candace, standing at the microphone, preparing to humiliate me publicly, only to have federal agents walk through the marble doors and slap cuffs on her wrists. The scene was too cinematic, too perfect to be real. My phone rang. An unknown Colorado number. I recognized the Willow Creek area code. Should I answer it? Owen didn't hesitate. No, nothing good comes from unknown numbers during a family crisis. The call went to voicemail. Then another unknown number called. Then another. The news was spreading. Candace is probably calling relatives to warn them about my deception, I whispered, realizing the chain of panic had already started. She doesn't know about the Attorney General yet, Owen said, a touch of grim amusement in his voice. She's still planning her ambush, not knowing she's already been ambushed. My laptop chimed with an email notification. It was from Diane's address, the first direct contact in 5 years. Subject: family obligations. I opened it, reading the cold, familiar script. Skylar, your father and I expect you at your grandmother's party. Whatever games you're playing with your sister need to stop immediately. Family comes first, not your hurt feelings. It's time to grow up and take responsibility for your choices. We'll discuss your behavior privately after the celebration. Mother. I closed the laptop and pushed it away. They still didn't get it. They thought this was about sibling rivalry and hurt feelings. They thought I was the problem. Are you going? Owen's question hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. Am I going to walk into that emotional battlefield? Am I going to face down parents who still see me as the family disappointment? Am I going to watch Candace get arrested at our grandmother's birthday party? Yes, I said, the single word firm and without inflection. I have to be there. Not for revenge, not for vindication, but because running away now would prove everything they ever said. That I'm weak, that I can't handle responsibility, that I'm the problem. I'd spent 5 years building something real. I wasn't hiding from the truth anymore, even if the truth came with handcuffs and shattered reputations. The next day, the family campaign escalated, becoming a frantic, disorganized assault. My phone didn't stop buzzing. Social media, notifications from cousins I barely remembered. WhatsApp messages piling up in the Hayes family group chat that somehow impossibly still included my number. I scrolled through them in Vanguard Shield's executive conference room. Uncle Thomas's wife posting cryptic updates. Some people think success gives them the right to abandon family. Cousin Chloe sharing articles about loyalty with pointed comments. The digital breadcrumbs of Candace's pre-party sabotage were everywhere, preparing everyone for whatever bomb she planned to drop. The family campaign is escalating, I told Owen, sliding my phone across the conference table. He was reviewing a stack of government contracts, protection systems for voting infrastructure in 3 new states. Real work that mattered. He skimmed the messages, his jaw tightening. Want me to have our legal team send a cease and desist? For what? Telling relatives that their successful sister might be hiding something. I leaned back. She's too smart for anything actionable. Just planting seeds of doubt. But the doubt still crept into my own mind. Maybe they're right about me. Maybe a $250 million company doesn't make me worthy of respect. Maybe I really am just playing with code. The old programming was hard to overwrite. Then my phone rang. Unknown Colorado number. I hesitated, then answered. Skylar, we need to talk. It was my father, Harrison. His voice sounded thin, gravelly with false authority. I hadn't heard it in 5 years. It sounded smaller than I remembered, less commanding. Age, maybe. Or the realization that his intimidation tactics didn't work on someone who built her own empire. About what, Dad? I kept my voice neutral, professional. He paused, and I heard my mother's sharp, insistent voice in the background. Your mother and I, we think it would be best if you didn't attend the party. The familiar, devastating punch of rejection hit my chest. Even now, even after everything I'd accomplished, they wanted me gone. The inconvenient daughter who might disrupt their perfect family narrative. Because Candace says you've been spreading vicious rumors that her nonprofit has financial problems, Dad continued, quoting her talking points directly. We don't need that kind of drama at Alara's celebration. Spreading lies. The projection was stunning. I had spoken to exactly 0 family members about Candace's crimes. I had been silent for 5 years while they constructed whatever fantasy version of events helps them sleep at night. I haven't said anything to anyone about Candace, I said. Believe what you want, Dad, but I'll see you at the party. I hung up before he could respond. Owen watched me carefully. You okay? They just uninvited me for my own grandmother's birthday party because Candace convinced them I'm some kind of criminal mastermind. I laughed, but it came out hollow. The system works, I guess. The truth will work harder, Owen said quietly. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like standing in quicksand while my family threw stones. My phone rang again. This time, the number made my heart skip. It was Alara. Hello, sweetheart. Alara's voice, crystal clear despite her 78 years. Grandma, I heard Harrison called. He uninvited me to your party. Harrison doesn't get to uninvite people to my party, she retorted, her tone sharpening. Neither does Candace, though she's been suggesting I should reconsider who attends. As if I need a criminal's advice about guest lists. The word hit me. Criminal. Not speculation, not accusation. Fact. You know about the investigation, sweetheart. I do, Grandma. I'm just worried the shock might kill you. Alara laughed, a dry, elegant sound. Skylar, I'm 78, not fragile. I've survived the Great Depression, 3 recessions, and your grandfather's midlife crisis. I think I can handle learning that my granddaughter protected herself from a predator. Predator, another word that hit like truth. Wait, I said, sinking back into my chair, suddenly breathless. You know about the investigation? Sweetheart, I commissioned it, Alara said calmly. The world stopped. What? 2 months ago, I ordered my own audit of Candace's nonprofit, Alara explained. Something about her finances never added up. New Mercedes on a nonprofit salary. European vacations funded by donor appreciation events. I'm old, Skylar, but I'm not stupid. My grandmother, sharp-minded, suspicious, and fiercely protective of family resources, had seen through Candace's golden child performance while everyone else was distracted. The auditor found everything, Alara continued. The embezzlement, the phantom expenses, the money stolen from our Hayes family trust. When that private investigator, Mr. Peterson, approached me last week with similar findings, I shared my audit with him. Made his job much easier. The pieces clicked into place, not just the financial details, but the emotional ones. Grant Peterson, Candace's PI, had two sources of evidence: the paper trail he uncovered and the highly credible, independently gathered evidence from the family matriarch herself. No wonder the Attorney General's office was moving so quickly. Why didn't you tell anyone, Grandma? I asked, a mix of awe and frustration in my voice, because I wanted to see how far she'd go, how much she'd steal, how many people she'd hurt before someone stopped her. Alara's voice carried 5 decades of family wisdom. Turns out, she was planning to hurt you publicly while stealing from the family privately. That's when I knew she'd gone too far. I was overwhelmed. Candace's final, desperate card, threatening Grandma to keep me quiet, was played against someone who was already 3 moves ahead. The golden child thought she was cornering the matriarch. She didn't know the matriarch was the one who started the investigation in the first place. I'm just worried about the shock for you, I admitted. If she gets arrested at the party. Skylar! Alara cut me off gently. I've lived long enough to know that the biggest shock is when we stop telling the truth. I need this to happen publicly. The Hayes have lived under the delusion of perfection for too long. Sometimes a little spectacular reality is necessary for healing. She paused. Candace doesn't know I have copies of everything. Bank records, forged signatures, diverted donations. She thinks she's holding all the cards. But I've been playing this game longer than she's been alive. For the first time in days, I truly smiled. I'll see you at the party, Grandma. I'm counting on it, dear. Someone needs to witness justice being served. After we hung up, I sat in the silent conference room, processing the emotional magnitude of what I had learned. My grandmother, the elderly woman they all patronized and protected, was the silent, brilliant strategist. She was the one who truly protected the family's honor, not by covering up flaws, but by exposing the rot within. I checked the time. 24 hours until the party. 24 hours until a room full of relatives discovered their golden child was a criminal, while their scapegoat was a CEO. 24 hours until 5 years of silence ended in one spectacular, unavoidable evening. My phone buzzed with another family group chat notification. This time, it was Candace herself. Looking forward to seeing everyone tomorrow night. It's time some truths came to light. I almost laughed. She had no idea how right she was. The doors of the Rocky Crest Lodge ballroom swung open with a kind of dramatic, theatrical timing that only happens in movies or in the catastrophic climax of a toxic family drama. I stepped inside, and 150 conversations simply halted mid-sentence. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Wine glasses paused at lips. The silence spread through the opulent room like spilled, dark ink. They had expected broken. They were getting bulletproof. My Armani blazer fit like a second skin, solid and tailored. 5 years of intensive therapy, relentless self-improvement, and a $250 million net worth had given me something they couldn't comprehend. Unshakable, quiet confidence. Across the room, Candace's face went chalk white. She was standing near the head table, a microphone clutched in her manicured hand, clearly caught mid-preparation for whatever public humiliation she had planned. Her mouth opened slightly, then snapped shut. This wasn't the broken woman she expected to destroy tonight. It was but Alara's smile that grounded me. She sat at the head table like the queen she had always been, her sharp gray eyes twinkling with a shared, powerful secret. She and I were the only two people in this room who knew what was really about to unfold. I didn't rush toward any particular group. I didn't announce my presence or offer explanations. I simply walked through the space like I belonged here because I did. Success had taught me that confidence wasn't about proving yourself. It was about knowing your own worth and letting others catch up. Cousin Jillian approached first. Her face flushed with what looked like embarrassment and curiosity. "Skylar, wow, you look." She gestured vaguely at my outfit, my posture, the aura of quiet authority I had developed. "Different," I finished for her. 5 years will do that." Uncle Thomas stared from his corner table, trying to reconcile the dismissed family failure with the woman standing before him in designer clothing. I caught his eye and nodded politely. He nearly choked on his wine. Candace finally found her voice. She tapped the microphone twice, the feedback screech cutting through the low murmur that had started up again. "Ladies and gentlemen, family and friends." Her voice carried that practiced, saccharine public speaking tone she had perfected through her nonprofit work. "Tonight, we're not just celebrating Grandma Alara's 78th birthday. We're also welcoming someone home." The emphasis on someone dipped with false warmth. I leaned against the back wall, arms crossed, letting her perform. "Yes, tonight we welcome Skylar home. As a CO." The skepticism in her voice was thick enough to cut. Several relatives shifted uncomfortably. Dad's face hardened from his table near the front. Mom's hand fluttered to her pearl necklace, checking that it was still there. Candace's pivot was smoother than I expected. She abandoned whatever evidence-based attack she'd planned and went straight for emotional manipulation. But what is success worth when it's built on ingratitude, on abandoning the family who raised you, who loved you, who only wanted the best for you? Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Heads nodded. The Hayes family had always been good at collective judgment. Success without family loyalty is just sophisticated selfishness. Candace's voice grew stronger as she sensed the room's support. I didn't flinch. 5 years ago, these words would have crushed me. The 26-year-old Skylar would have crumbled under this public shaming, scrambling to defend herself with explanations no one wanted to hear. But that woman was gone. Some people think money makes them better than the people who sacrificed for them. Candace pushed, her voice becoming vicious. I remembered the last therapy session before I decided to come tonight. Dr. Martinez asking the question that changed everything. What would the 26-year-old Skylar do right now? The answer had been devastatingly immediate. She would have stood up, red-faced and desperate, trying to defend herself with words they'd never believe. The present-day me understood that truth doesn't need a defense attorney. I stood quietly near the back wall, letting Candace hang herself with her own rope. Every vicious word revealed more about her character than mine. Every desperate attack showcased their insecurities and prejudices. The room's energy was shifting. Guests were noticing the contrast. Candace's frantic, increasingly desperate accusations versus my calm, collected, unshakable presence. I wasn't begging for acceptance. I was simply here, confident, an unmovable object. Uncle Thomas muttered to his wife, just loud enough for nearby tables to hear, "She doesn't look like a failure to me." Candace's speech reached its crescendo. Success built on abandoning family isn't success at all. It's just sophisticated betrayal. The ballroom doors opened again. The sight of them cut through the dense party atmosphere like a knife through silk. 2 detectives and an investigator from the Colorado Attorney General's office entered the ballroom at 7:52 p.m., their badges catching the chandelier light. They didn't belong here. Their purposeful stride was too heavy, too serious for the gilded room. Conversations died again, but this time the silence felt different, dangerous, irreversible. The lead detective's voice, calm and commanding, carried just enough to reach the microphone Candace still held. Ms. Candace Hayes. Every single head in the room turned toward the head table. Candace's face, flushed with righteous indignation a moment ago, went corpse pale. The microphone slipped from her manicured hand, thudding loudly on the carpet. She looked at her parents, who were already staring at her with confused horror. "You are under arrest for embezzlement and fraud." The words hit the ballroom like a physical blow. Someone dropped a wine glass. The crystal shatter echoed off the marble floor. A collective gasp swept through the 150 stunned guests, a visceral wave of shock that made the air feel thin. I watched from my position against the wall. I didn't move. I simply observed. Handcuffs clicked around the golden child's wrists. The sound was sharp, metallic, and final, cutting through the collective silence. Candace's public humiliation had begun. She was escorted past the head table, where Grandma Elara sat with perfect composure, her expression neither surprised nor triumphant, just resolved. She was led past relatives whose mouths hung open in disbelief, past parents whose perfect world was crumbling in real time. And then she was led past me. Our eyes met for one brief, agonizing moment as the detectives ushered her toward the exit. In her eyes, I saw fear, white-hot rage, and something else I didn't recognize. Defeat. Utter, complete defeat. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I didn't even breathe a sigh of relief. I simply witnessed justice finally being served in the most spectacular, self-inflicted way possible. The ballroom erupted into chaos the moment the doors closed behind them. Harrison and Diane Hayes rushed toward me, their voices rising in desperate confusion and, of course, misplaced blame. "Skylar, what did you do? How could you do this to your own sister?" They still thought I was the orchestrator, the problem. Grandma Elara's clear, strong voice cut through their panic. She was the one who controlled the room, even from her chair. Skylar did nothing. The Attorney General's office did their job. The truth is finally being seen. The family's conspiracy of willful blindness, which had protected Candace for so long, finally cracked. Relatives began whispering frantically. Wait, if Skylar didn't report this, then who did? Owen Miller entered quietly through a side door, his presence confirming what some guests were beginning to suspect. I saw Uncle Thomas looking at me, then at Owen, and then back at me. He was connecting the dots, my company, my influence, my competence. I wasn't the family failure anymore. I was the only one left standing. The ballroom buzzed with whispered conversations that sliced through the air like static electricity. The birthday cake sat untouched, its 78 candles, now cold wax puddles on buttercream. 20 minutes had passed since Candace left in handcuffs. 20 minutes since my family's world cracked wide open. I heard the murmurs from a cluster of guests near the dessert table. It was embezzlement, Aunt Carol whispered to Uncle Thomas. $500,000 from her own charity, and money from the Hayes Family Trust. I watched my parents. Dad stood with his back against the wall, his face the color of concrete. Mom sat in a chair, clutching a tissue that had disintegrated from overuse. They looked like survivors of a natural disaster, which I suppose they were. A natural disaster named consequences. Skylar. Elara's voice drew my attention. She was still wearing her birthday tiara, looking more alert and sharp than anyone else in the room. Would you help me with something? I crossed to her table, keenly aware that conversations paused as I passed. 5 years ago, these people watched me leave as the family failure. Tonight, they were seeing me as something else entirely. Sit with me, dear. Elara patted the chair beside her. I think it's time I shared something with everyone. She stood slowly, reaching for the microphone Candace had abandoned. Her voice, amplified by the sound system, was steady and commanding. "Friends, family, I know tonight has been shocking for many of you, but I need to tell you something important." She paused, her eyes locking onto Dad's shocked face across the room. 2 months ago, I commissioned my own audit of Candace's nonprofit organization. The room went silent, completely. Even the catering staff stopped moving. "I've been suspicious for some time," Elara continued, unflinching. "Candace lived well above what a nonprofit director should earn. Her European vacation last spring, funded, she claimed, by a bonus, raised questions. So I hired forensic accountants to examine her books." Dad's face turned from gray to sickly white. "Mother, what are you saying?" "I'm saying I discovered what Mr. Peterson discovered. Forged signatures on donation receipts. Phantom expenses for events that never happened. Money diverted from programs meant to help at-risk children." Her voice strengthened with each word, becoming an undeniable roar of truth. "And $50,000 stolen from our Hayes Family Trust. Money that was designated for my medical care." The gasp that ran through the room sounded like wind rushing through dry leaves. "Grandma Elara found bank records," I added quietly, my voice carrying in the stunned silence. "The Hayes Family Trust money funded Candace's vacation to Europe." Uncle Thomas's face flushed crimson. "You mean she stole from her own grandmother, while criticizing others for their greed?" "While positioning herself as the moral center of our family," Elara confirmed. I watched the information sink in. These people had spent decades seeing Candace as the golden child, the responsible one, the daughter who stayed close and cared for family. Learning that she systematically stole from the very people who adored her created a cognitive dissonance that showed on every face. Mom finally spoke, her voice a reedy whisper. "How much?" $500,000 from the charity," Detective Williams answered from across the room, having returned for follow-up questions. $50,000 from the family trust. Total restitution of $550,000. The number hung in the air like a guillotine. "We don't have that kind of money," Dad said quietly, the bravado finally gone. He looked utterly broken. "Not liquid. We'd have to sell the house." I felt a complex emotion I couldn't quite name. Not satisfaction exactly, not vindication. Something sadder and more final. The family that valued appearances above all else was about to lose everything that maintained those appearances. Their sprawling house, their country club membership, their position in Willow Creek society. All of it built on a foundation that had just collapsed. "Harrison, Diane." Detective Williams approached my parents. "The district attorney wants to discuss cooperation in your daughter's case." As they walked away, heads bowed, I noticed something profound that I hadn't felt in 5 years. The absence of their disapproval didn't hurt anymore. Their opinion of me, good or bad, simply didn't matter. Success didn't give me that freedom. Money didn't buy it. Justice, delivered with the unflinching strength of my grandmother, did. The detective finished his questioning, making sure I formally confirmed I had no part in reporting Candace's crimes, despite my sister's conviction to the contrary. Professional obligations required the PI to report the felony financial crimes to our office, he reiterated, before leaving my parents to their devastating conversation. Cousin Jillian approached me hesitantly. Her face was pale, her expression contrite. "Skylar, I owe you an apology. We all do. 5 years ago when you left, we thought you were being dramatic, ungrateful. But seeing this tonight, understanding what Candace was really doing." I touched her arm gently. "You don't need to apologize. You believed what made sense based on the information you had. But we should have looked deeper. she insisted, her eyes glossy. Should have questioned why the successful daughter needed to tear down the struggling one. That hit closer to the truth than she probably realized. Toxic families require scapegoats to function. Someone has to be the problem, so everyone else can feel like the solution. But the most important moment was still to come. Alara reclaimed the microphone one last time. The room, which had descended into panicked clusters, fell silent immediately. Before this evening ends, I want to say something about my granddaughter, Skylar. My stomach tightened again. Public attention still felt dangerous, even when positive. 5 years ago, Skylar walked away from this family, Alara began. Many of you judged that decision, including myself, in private moments of frustration. But sometimes walking away is the most courageous choice available. Her eyes found mine across the room, clear and unwavering. She built something remarkable in that time, a business that protects people's digital security, real work that makes the world safer. She paused, and I saw tears in her eyes, not tears of sadness, but of pure, profound recognition. I'm proud of her. I should have said that years ago, publicly when it mattered most. But I'm saying it now. The words, the 5 words I had spent 31 years needing to hear, didn't come from my mother. They came from the one person who truly saw me. They landed not as validation, but as a final, definitive period on a sentence I had been struggling to finish. 3 hours later, I helped Grandma Alara blow out the candles on her cake. The party had dwindled to only a few close family members, and the atmosphere felt like the aftermath of a storm. Damaged but cleaner somehow. Through the ballroom windows, I watched police cars leave with the last of the evidence boxes. Candace would spend the next few years in federal prison. Dad and Mom would spend the next decade rebuilding their lives from scratch, financially and socially devastated. And I would continue building mine. As I walked Alara to her waiting car, she squeezed my arm. 6 months from now, dear, I suspect you'll transform this whole mess into something positive. That's who you are. She was right. I was already planning to acquire Candace's defunct nonprofit for a symbolic $1 and rebuild it as a legitimate organization. The Hayes Digital Safety Initiative would actually help at-risk youth learn cybersecurity skills. Success built on the ruins of corruption. Justice served with a side of poetic irony. Perfect. The freedom I felt was not the sudden rush of power or wealth. It was the quiet, unshakable knowledge that their judgment no longer held any sway. The battle was over, not because I won an argument, but because the truth itself had fought for me. I had finally achieved what Dr. Martinez called the ultimate success, being the author of my own piece. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of what used to be Candace's corner office. It was 18 months after that explosive night at the Rocky Crest Lodge. I stood in the renovated headquarters of the former Willow Creek Hearts, now proudly relaunched as the Hayes Digital Safety Initiative. The irony was not lost on me. I had bought my sister's criminal enterprise for $1 and turned it into something that actually protected children online. 25 employees now worked at standing desks where Candace once orchestrated her embezzlement schemes. Their conversations buzzed with genuine excitement about coding workshops for at-risk youth and digital literacy programs. The name Hayes finally meant something positive in Willow Creek, something I built from the ashes of my sister's corruption. Victor Chavez, our program director, approached with a tablet showing enrollment numbers. We've got 15 kids signed up for Saturday's workshop. 2 are from the Riverside group home, the same group home where Candace claimed to send donations that never arrived. Perfect, I told him. Make sure Maya has extra pizza ordered. My phone chimed with an email that stopped my breath. The sender line read, Alara Hayes, Sunset Manor Assisted Living. The subject, Sunday dinner invitation. 6 years. 6 years since I received a family dinner invitation. And this one came from Grandma Alara in her new facility, not from Harrison and Diane in their modest apartment across town. It was the same elegant, cream cardstock, the same beautiful script, but the power dynamic had shifted completely. The invitation didn't command my attendance or manipulate my guilt. It simply offered an option, a choice. I tapped reply and typed, "Looking forward to it, Grandma. Should I bring anything?" No fear, no second-guessing, no desperate need to prove my worth through perfect behavior. Just a granddaughter saying yes to her grandmother because she wanted to. The memory surfaced unbidden. A key moment from therapy. "Tell me about approval," Dr. Martinez had said. I spent 31 years trying to earn approval from people who were never going to give it, I'd confessed. It's like asking a broken vending machine for snacks. You keep feeding it quarters, hitting buttons, getting nothing back, but you convince yourself the next quarter will work. What happens when you stop feeding the machine? You find a working one, that breakthrough moment, realizing that seeking validation from toxic people wasn't persistence, it was insanity. The emotional freedom of building self-worth through achievement and service, rather than family approval, had taken months to feel real, but now it lived in my bones. "I don't need their pride anymore," I whispered to the empty office. "I have my own." Owen's voice carried from the hallway as he discussed quarterly projections with our newest hire. Last month, I promoted him to company president. Our professional partnership had become the kind of lifelong friendship I never knew was possible. Vanguard Shield had expanded to 5 states, protecting critical infrastructure. The Forbes recognition had led to keynote speaking opportunities, and last week, a fellow entrepreneur named Ethan asked me to dinner after my presentation in Seattle. Not because he wanted something from my company, but because he admired the strength it took to rebuild my family's reputation while protecting my own boundaries. I checked my phone. A text from Jillian. Saw the local news piece about the Digital Safety Initiative. "Mom says she's proud of what you're building." Even Aunt Carol, who hadn't spoken to me in 5 years, was finally acknowledging that perhaps I hadn't been the family failure after all. Uncle Thomas's construction company, now, contracted Vanguard Shield for their cybersecurity needs. A relationship built on mutual respect, not obligated family tolerance. I drove to Sunset Manor for Grandma Alara's 79th birthday dinner. 8 people gathered in the assisted living dining room. Harrison and Diane were notably absent, still dealing with the fallout and the financial restructuring. Candace was in year 2 of federal prison. Cousin Jillian passed the mashed potatoes. Uncle Thomas shared construction stories that actually made Alara laugh. The conversation flowed around normal topics. Alara's facilities, book club, my latest government contract protecting voting systems. No drama, no manipulation, no walking on eggshells. Just normal connection between adults who respected each other. "Tell me about this young man in Seattle," Alara said with a knowing smile. "His name is Ethan. He builds renewable energy systems. Does he make you laugh?" "He does." "Good. Laughter is important." No interrogation about his income, his family background, or his 5-year plan. Just a grandmother wanting her granddaughter to be happy. Driving home through Denver's evening skyline, Vanguard Shield's headquarters glowing among the towers, I deleted 17 missed calls from a blocked number. Probably Diane, still trying to guilt me into family obligations that no longer existed. I deleted them without listening, the same way I deleted spam. My smile wasn't about the money. It was about the mission, the purpose, the knowledge that my pain had transformed into protection for others. I pulled into my building's garage and retrieved my journal. 5 years ago, I walked out of my family's house as a failure. Tonight, I drove home to my own life as a success. The difference wasn't the money. It was learning that some battles win themselves when you stop fighting them. Candace destroyed herself, trying to destroy me. I won by becoming someone worth protecting. The ultimate form of revenge isn't tearing down your enemy. It's building yourself so high that their destruction becomes irrelevant to your life. True family isn't determined by blood, but by the people who show up and see your worth when your world is falling apart. The most courageous thing you can ever do is walk away from toxicity and invest that energy into becoming the person you were always meant to be. For me, that meant listening to the quiet wisdom of my grandmother and refusing to be the family's scapegoat any longer. If you could go back to one moment in your past and choose the courageous path of walking away, what would that moment be, and what would you build instead? Thank you for listening to my story. I'll catch you next time.